It was a golden afternoon in New York City, the kind of day where the sun bounced off glass towers and everyone seemed to be in a rush towards something important, and in the midst of that rush, fate decided to orchestrate an unforgettable lesson that would expose pride, prejudice, arrogance, and ultimately justice in its most poetic form. Because it all began when Clarissa Wentworth, a wealthy woman in her late 40s with diamond earrings that seemed to scream her importance and a voice sharpened by years of ordering people around, walked into the upscale Madison Avenue boutique with her assistant trailing behind her carrying 3 designer handbags she had already purchased earlier that morning, and as she strutted with her nose slightly raised, her gaze fell upon a black woman standing by the display of limited edition handbags, a woman dressed elegantly yet modestly in a flowing cream blouse, fitted navy pants, and understated jewelry that spoke of class without ostentation, and for some reason Clarissa's eyes narrowed, because in her world appearances dictated worth, and she immediately assumed that this woman, despite her grace, did not belong in what Clarissa considered to be her shopping territory, so with a haughty sniff she walked closer, bumping shoulders ever so slightly as though to make a point, and when the black woman politely said, "Excuse me, you brushed past me," Clarissa's arrogance flared up like a spark to gasoline, leading her to sneer, "People like you should watch where you stand, you're lucky they even let you in here," and before anyone could process what happened next, Clarissa's manicured hand flew across the woman's face with a sharp crack that echoed through the boutique, causing assistants, clerks, and nearby shoppers to freeze in absolute shock, for such an act was not only vile but humiliating, and the victim, rather than responding with equal aggression, placed her hand calmly on her cheek and locked eyes with Clarissa in a way that conveyed a quiet strength, a power simmering beneath the surface, though Clarissa mistook it for weakness and laughed smugly, tossing her hair back, while the assistant mumbled nervously, "Ma'am, maybe that was too far." Yet Clarissa dismissed her concerns with a wave, announcing loudly, if her husband could afford to buy her a bag, maybe she wouldn't be loitering in here hoping for scraps, and the cruelty of her words caused a collective gasp to ripple through the boutique, because while Clarissa thought she was cementing her dominance, she had unknowingly sown the seed of her downfall, as the black woman finally broke her silence, speaking in a calm, dignified tone. "You have no idea who I am, and that will be your greatest mistake." Clarissa scoffed, rolling her eyes, snapping at the clerk to bring her the newest arrivals and muttering under her breath about how charity cases wander where they don't belong. But what she didn't know was that within minutes her entire world of superiority would come crashing down, because that black woman was none other than Amara Bennett, the deeply private and elegant wife of Alexander Bennett, one of the most powerful billionaire CEOs in America, the man whose empire stretched across finance, tech, real estate, and philanthropy, a man whose influence was such that even political leaders sought his counsel, and Amara herself, though preferring to live quietly, commanded immense respect in elite circles not because of her wealth but because of her intelligence, her advocacy for women of color in business, and her reputation as a woman who could silence entire rooms with nothing more than her composure. So when word of the public slap spread, because an onlooker had recorded the entire altercation on their phone and uploaded it to social media, within an hour the clip exploded across platforms, sparking outrage, debate, and fierce calls for accountability, as hashtags like #JusticeForAmara, #SlappedButStronger, and #ClarissaCancelled trended globally, while Clarissa remained blissfully unaware in her chauffeur-driven car, sipping champagne from a crystal flute and bragging to her friends in a group chat about putting an entitled woman in her place, unaware that her name and face were already plastered across news sites, blogs, and gossip columns, all condemning her behavior and dissecting her cruelty. And as the hours passed her phone began to buzz uncontrollably with calls from her husband, her lawyer, and her public relations agent, but Clarissa brushed them off until finally she answered her husband's call, only to hear him shout, "Do you realize what you've done? Do you know who that woman is?" And as he explained that the woman she had slapped was married to Alexander Bennett, Clarissa's blood drained from her face, her hand trembling as she stammered, That can't be true, she looked so ordinary," and her husband roared back, "Ordinary? She's one of the most respected women in America, and you just slapped her in front of cameras. Our entire business could go under because of your arrogance." And it was true, because Alexander Bennett was known not only for his vast wealth but also for his unforgiving stance against those who disrespected his family, and Clarissa's husband's company, which relied heavily on Bennett's investment firm, was already at risk of being cut off, with millions of dollars on the line. So within 24 hours Clarissa's name had become synonymous with classist arrogance, as protesters gathered outside her luxury townhouse, demanding accountability, while reporters camped out to capture every moment of her downfall. And in the midst of the chaos, Amara remained silent, refusing to give interviews, refusing to fuel the frenzy, choosing instead to let the world's reaction speak for itself, which only elevated her status as a woman of grace and dignity, until 1 week later she finally appeared at a charity gala for women entrepreneurs, dressed in an emerald gown that shimmered like authority itself, and when she walked onto the stage the applause thundered across the hall, not because of her husband's wealth but because of the way she embodied resilience, and she addressed the crowd with poise, saying, "Dignity is not defined by the wealth we display, but by the respect we give and receive. Never mistake silence for weakness, for it is often silence that holds the greatest power." And her words were replayed millions of times, quoted in articles, shared as inspiration, while Clarissa, now shunned by her socialite circle, dropped from charity boards, abandoned by friends who didn't want her stain on their reputations, watched in horror as boutiques banned her from entry, airlines revoked her membership privileges, and her own assistant resigned, posting online, "I stayed silent too long, but no more. What you saw on camera is who she really is," further fueling the outrage. And in a twist that cemented her fate, Alexander Bennett himself finally addressed the scandal at a press conference, his voice calm but carrying the weight of authority. "My wife has carried herself with grace and strength despite an unprovoked public assault. Wealth should never be a license for cruelty. To those who believe arrogance is power, let this be a reminder that true power lies in respect." And with that statement, he announced that his firm would be pulling every investment from Clarissa's husband's company effective immediately, a decision that sent their stocks plummeting overnight and forced them into bankruptcy within months, leaving Clarissa not only disgraced but stripped of the wealth she had flaunted like armor, while Amara and Alexander only grew stronger in public admiration, not because of vengeance but because of the example they set. And the irony of it all was that Clarissa, who once thought herself above others, was now reduced to hiding from paparazzi in grocery store parking lots, muttering to herself about how it was just a slap, never fully grasping that it wasn't the slap alone but the disdain behind it that destroyed her, while Amara continued her philanthropic work, mentoring young women, proving that grace always outshines arrogance, and that sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply living well, respected, and loved, while your enemies collapse under the weight of their own cruelty.